Hello channel viewers, I am DS, a psychologist, and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. So in this episode, I am going to discuss something I find personally very meaningful, and that is existential depression. Whenever I think of existential depression, I think of the INTJ, because at least 2 INTJs that I know of suffer from existential depression. So if you are interested to know why INTJs are usually so sad, then maybe this episode can give you some insight, because it is possible that the INTJ may be suffering from existential depression. So I think that I am a very good candidate for delivering this video, because personally I also suffer from existential depression. I have existential depression since I was 8 years old. So I've given this video some thought, and I decided to break this video into a few different parts. I'm going to answer several questions with regards to existential depression. So at the end of this video, you should be able to understand better what existential depression is, because it is a very rare type of depression. Okay, so the first question is, what is existential depression? To keep it really short, existential depression is basically a depression that arises from the realization that everything is hopeless in the end. That existence is hopeless. There is nothing at the end of the journey except death. So I'm going to describe to you more about existential depression later. Question number 2. Who suffers from existential depression? So anyone could at any point in their life start to think about existence. Why are they living? What is their purpose? So when you start thinking about your existence, it can potentially lead to existential depression, because you're very sad about the fact that you are going to die one day, or that you have achieved nothing so far. So it is possible that a person who is in midlife crisis to be prone to existential depression. However, studies have shown that this is just not exclusive to people who are suffering from midlife crisis. Children, especially intelligent and talented children, from very young ages could start to develop existential depression. So personally, I think that INTJs are generally very intelligent people. This is why they are more prone to existential depression. Another thing that I note about people who suffer from existential depression is that they tend not to have any religion. So this is why they question existence in a way that religion doesn't serve as a buffer for them. So I have a third question that I want to answer about existential depression, and that is, how long does it typically last? So as an individual, I have actually suffered from existential depression since I was 8 years old. I was just lying down on bed one day and I started thinking about death. I started first thinking about the death of my parents in the future. Like, what would happen if my mother dies, and then if my daddy dies, what's going to be of me? Then I start to think about my own death, and I feel very frightened. Since then, the thought of death always plagues me and makes me feel very fearful until today. But existential depression also evolves with age. So during my teenage years, I started thinking about existence. Why am I living? Why do people die? Why do people die young? So there are a lot of questions that we can really answer about existence, not only about death. So we might ask questions like, is there God? If there is God, why doesn't God punish bad people? So there might be a lot of unanswered questions, and entertaining them and trying to figure out the answer alone can be rather depressing. So today, I still suffer from existential depression from time to time. So on the next question, I will explain what triggers existential depression. But for now, my point is, the onset of existential depression can be as early as childhood times, and throughout one's lifespan, they might have several episodes of existential depression. So I'm very glad that I'm an ENTJ, because I have SE as my third function, so I am quite ready to bounce out of this situation. So typically, if I have an episode, it may last from between 3 days to a week. In some years, I have existential depression 2 to 3 times a year. then I do miss some years. So there might be years where I totally do not have any episodes at all. So I do know of a few INTJs with existential depression. So unfortunately for the INTJs, SE is their inferior function, so they may dwell in this depression for a much longer period of time. So my personal experience is the existential depression that an INTJ may be in can last for weeks, months, or even years. So our next question is, what triggers episodes of existential depression? So there might be a few triggers. A first common trigger of existential depression is the news of death of someone else. So this someone else could be a person that we know, it could be a stranger, so we could witness an accident, or we could hear of a person who has passed on. Alternatively, we could watch the news and find that during an accident, a lot of people has died. So we might feel, how come life is so fragile? And from there, when we start thinking about it, existential depression is fed and it develops. Another possibility of existential depression developing is when we experience failure. So I would say that people who suffer from existential depression have very high ideals, especially when they are already suffering from existential depression as children. So these people tend to be idealistic, they also tend to be talented, so a lot of times they want to do a lot of things. Sometimes they get stuck, and this is where they feel as if life is very stagnant. So in a single day, nothing has been achieved. So there is this burning feeling that we are doing nothing about our life, and our life is just wearing itself out. We are just dying, and then we are doing nothing about it. So it's frustrating, and it can cause us to feel upset, and slowly this frustration becomes a depression. So this failure can be in all aspects of our life. So it could potentially come from work, but it could also come from our relationships. But that is not to say that failure is the only cause of existential depression. Sometimes success can also lead to existential depression. So let's say I'm achieving so much, I'm earning so much, but I feel that there is nobody to share it with me. Sometimes you can have the world, you can have all the success that you want, but there is still this form of emptiness. So it could be because of a lack of companion to share this joy with you, or it could also stem from the fact that you think that all this wealth that you have accumulated is basically nothing, because at the end of the day, you die. So existential depression does not help a person who has no children, no dependents. Why? This is because they could accumulate so much wealth, they could have so much success, but they could not hand it over to anyone. So another trigger of existential depression is the spiritual awakening. So your spiritual self feels undernourished. This is where you feel like, hey, why am I so engrossed in TV games or in material things? You feel as if there needs to be more to life. So viewers, I do have many more things to share about existential depression, such as how do you get out of existential depression when you start to have an episode. So because there's really a lot of content in existential depression that I'm going to share, I have decided to split this entire topic into 2 different videos. So I will showcase part 2 of existential depression in our next video, so do watch out for it. If you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more psychological content, MBTI and fun stuff. Okay, for now I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you in my next episode. Goodbye!